Hello, and welcome to the Innovating Inclusion podcast, where we're exploring inclusivity, disability awareness, universal design, and entrepreneurship. My name's Katie Corbett, and I'm pleased to introduce my co-host. She's the host of the podcast, This Is What Blind Looks Like. Everybody welcome Angie Castro.
Hello, hello. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm very excited to share the conversations that we have had and are having.
And we're very privileged to have the world's first Black deafblind journalist with us, Stephen McCoy. Hey, Stephen.
Hey, what's up, y'all? We are so excited to be speaking with an array of guests, talking DEI, disability rights, building businesses from the ground up, and everything in between.
And Stephen, I know you're a little too humble to mention this, but you were recently named to the Forbes 40 Under 40 list. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I am so excited. We are elevating in the disability community and all spaces. We could do all things, and that's what it's about, innovating inclusion. So I'm excited.
And for today's episode, Stephen and Angie had a chance to speak with Beth Ruffin, who is on a mission to reach 1 million people with the message of inclusion.
She'll be talking about DEI, self-inclusion, in her new podcast, The Permission Project.
She also shared her journey with an invisible disability, something I can totally relate to. It was truly just a privilege to be speaking with her about that and so many other things. So you guys have to tune in.
Everyone, please enjoy this conversation with Beth Ruffin.
Welcome, Beth Ruffin. Thank you so much for coming on to Innovating Inclusion.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. We want to introduce our audience to the amazing work that you do in the inclusion space.
Absolutely. So I teach people how to include themselves and others. If you know about this work, you know a lot about inclusion is to bring in other people who are different from you, to value differences. And so a lot of that work I do is in the corporate and nonprofit space where I'm working with organizational leaders around how they can make their workplaces more inclusive. But I also do the flip side of inclusion, which I call self-inclusion, and that is teaching people, how do you include yourself? How do you advocate and speak up? And how do you make room at the table for yourself, maybe when other people are not giving you that room?
It's so interesting because it was from you that I heard of self-inclusion. Oftentimes when we think of bringing inclusivity into the workplace or into our families, our friendships, our circle, we often feel we need to ask others how to be more inclusive. So when you said self-inclusion, it was almost like putting a mirror in my face. And it's a great challenge because it flips the switch to say, I will be the one to create this space and not wait for anyone else.
Right.
What was that moment for you where you just decided, you know what, I am going to be the one to create this space?
Yeah. So I spent the first 20 years of my career in the insurance field. And the insurance field, if anyone knows about this field, it is very white male heavy led. And so as a Black woman, there were so many times where I was the first of someone to do something or the only one to do something. Or I found that I was like begging for people to see me, to value me, to give me a seat at the table. And it wasn't until I actually took this class at the Harvard Kennedy School, and I realized that I had spent so much of my life waiting around to be included. And it was like a light bulb went off, like, no, actually, Beth, you have the power within you to be included. You have the power within you to get a seat at this table or to build a table for yourself. And it was shortly after this realization that I actually got the confidence to leave corporate America and start my own consulting firm.
Beth, I value what you say about self-inclusion because sometimes it's up to you to speak up and say, these are my needs, this is what I need, and these are things that can help me feel included.
So I had a wonderful opportunity in 2019 to give a speech from the Disney stage. was the company that I was working for. They do like an employee recognition event every year where they take hundreds of employees to Disney. They treat them like kings and queens. I was able to go as a participant in 2017, but then in 2019, I was asked to come speak. And I was on that stage and I had been speaking for a while. And afterwards, people were like, oh my God, I never knew that you could do this. This is awesome. I'm seeing you in a new light. And I really got that confidence. And I was like, I have been sitting here begging people to see my value. And I think I can go and I can do this for myself. That was the moment when I said, okay, I think I need to go ahead and start building some tables for myself.
Beth, a fun fact, I'm actually a Disney alumnus. I got my start working for the Walt Disney Company as an intern. Then I went to the Disney store, then got promoted as a host for Radio Disney, then Disney Theatrical, and then they inducted me into the Disney Alumni Association. So I love the fact that it was the Disney stage that you stood on, because I know personally and professionally that Disney has always been in support of inclusion. So it's beautiful to see your journey, and you really are an inspiration to so many women of all different career paths. What has been advice that you can share to someone that needed the guidance?
Yeah, I think the first piece of advice that I usually like to give is, what is the story that you're telling yourself? Because we know that feelings create stories which lead to action. And if you are used to being treated a certain way in your career, at work, you're telling yourself a story. And too often, the story becomes, I must not be good enough. I must not be ready. There's something that I'm lacking. And that's why I'm not furthering my career the way I want to. That's why I'm not being seen the way I want to or getting opportunities I want to. And oftentimes, the story is not that you're not enough. Oftentimes, the story is you're just not positioned in the right place.
So put yourself in position. I love that.
What lessons have you learned while being involved in the inclusivity space?
Not everyone is going to agree with this work. When I first started this work, I remember I was talking with a mentor of mine, and she said, Beth, my job is not to convince people that this work is the right thing to do. My job is to help them implement it. And I took that to heart, because I am not here to convince you that focusing on inclusion is the right thing to do. If I have to do that, then we're not ready to work together yet. My job is to help you implement it. And if I can tell a short story, so in April of 2021, I lost my mom, and she had been in the hospital sick for a couple of months. I had a new client that I was supposed to be working with, and the day that we were supposed to have our onboarding call, we were told that my mom was being moved to hospice. So as you can imagine, my mind is not focused on work. I'm focused on my family. I'm focused on, right, all of that it entails. And I get an email from someone and they said, hey, we missed you on the call today. And I wrote back, I said, I apologize. My mom had been sick and we just found out she's being moved to hospice today. Let me figure out what's going on and I can follow up to reschedule. And they wrote back and said, we're really sorry about that. But in the future, can you just let us know if you're not going to be able to make a call, because we were all here gathered. And I actually ended up firing that client. I never ended up working with them, because if I can't teach you about human decency, I can't teach you about inclusion, right? Like, human decency is the foundation of this work.
That's right.
There was a time where I would have pushed ahead because, oh, I need the money, or I need I need this client.
Right.
But self-inclusion tells me that while a client is trying to figure out if they want to work with me, that I also have the right and the power to figure out if I want to work with them. And if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. But that was something that I would not have done, I think, in the past, before I started really focusing on self-inclusion.
It sounds like maybe even after your mom passed, I don't know if you had a little more faith. I'm sure your mom would be absolutely proud of the woman that you become today. And I feel like your story is absolutely inspirational.
Stephen is trying to make me cry.
I know, like, I'm holding back myself it truly is amazing to see the fight that one has to put up with, but also the accountability that a woman standing up to say, you know what, I'm going to create this space that I want to walk into. I think that's powerful because oftentimes the truth is we may point the fingers at other people to say, you don't know better, you need to be taught this and that. But how about I just be the one to be the light and educate? And I'm glad that you took that lead. What are some of the benefits, would you say, that comes with your position being someone that is a leader in inclusion?
I'm going to say one that may be unexpected. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I think a benefit has been that she sees her mother stand up. She sees her mother advocate for herself, negotiate, take time for herself, rest when she needs to. So she is learning how to do that. My hope is that when she enters the workforce, that she will already be a mastered self-inclusionist and she'll already know how to do all of those things, and she won't maybe have to endure some of the trials that I had to when I started my career.
That's amazing.
Can you tell us, in your experience, what you believe are the biggest barriers to inclusion for both individuals and organizations?
Yeah. I would say the first is fear slash lack of knowledge. I talk a lot about unconscious bias. And unconscious bias is, simply put, the brain's way of keeping us safe. Because as you know, as humans, our brains are built to keep us safe and protected. We go towards that which is familiar to us. And those things that are not familiar to us can be seen as dangerous. And a lot of this work is you are having to overcome that fear. You're having to expose yourself to someone that is different from you. I'll also say a lot of times people are like, I don't know where to start, so I'm just not going to start at all. I'm just not going to do anything at all. So I think that actually works from both an organizational and an individual perspective, is that people get frozen, they get stuck. And it's like, I don't want to say or do the wrong thing. So we're just going to sit here. We're going to analyze it. And we get stuck in analysis paralysis, right?
I'm gonna just sit and wait till somebody decides to hold my hand and help me. I get it, right? We all have different thoughts. You might have a different idea of inclusion, and then I might have a different idea of like how I want to include myself into something. So I think all that is so important.
And for those who don't know exactly what your company is and the services that you do provide, are you able to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So my company is called the Everyday Inclusionist, and we just celebrated our 5-year anniversary on July 1st, 2020. I like to say, have y'all heard the term, we do everything from soup to nuts?
No.
I'm
Okay.
not sure if I did.
I feel like that's an old business term, but so we basically do everything from coming into an organization and doing an assessment to building a strategic plan to helping with implement that strategic plan as it comes to the work of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So most people know about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now a lot of people are adding the B on for belonging. I believe that when you have an organization that values diverse people, that is inclusive of everyone, and that is equitable, that you then build belonging. And this is really important from an organizational perspective because research shows us that when employees feel like they belong, they stay with the company longer. You have less turnover, you have less sick days, right? So people are actually working more, they're more productive, they're happier, they're going to rate your company more. One of the things that people talk about is this is the right thing to do. It absolutely is the right thing to do. It also makes good business sense. US businesses lose billions of dollars a year on attrition and losing employees. And so just think about, if you can just make your employees feel like they belong, how you can be saving money. You can be getting more work done, saving time, keeping your employees happier.
That's true.
Yeah, that's really important.
And then on the individual side, I do a lot of coaching, consulting, public speaking. One of the things I did when I started my business is I wanted to create what are the values of my company? And if they fit within the values, we do it, right? My goal is that 1 million people will hear the message of inclusion from my lips. And so that's everything inclusion, right? That's what we focus on.
Was there a moment in your life, because you have to have had experience the feeling of isolation in order to know what inclusion is and how to include other people? Where was that for you?
Unfortunately, I've had a lot of those moments. I can think of one. I was working for a company. This is years ago. It was a small company, and the CEO came into town. He lived out of state. I remember he walked down the aisle. On this one particular team, I was the only person of color. I will also say, because we don't talk about this a lot, I am a plus size woman, and there is bias for that in corporate America. I was the only person of color on this team. I was the only plus size person. And he came down the row and he spoke to everyone but me. And I remember I lifted this up to someone and they said, "Oh, I'm sure it wasn't, it was probably just a misstep, right? I'm sure it wasn't on purpose." And that's one thing I try to tell people is that we have to acknowledge the lived experiences of others. We have to believe what people tell us. And I know that in their heart, they were trying to counter that because they didn't want me to feel bad, right? But at the same time, they invalidated the experience that I had. And that has happened more times than it would take us all day for me to go through all of those experiences. But yet there are many times through my career where I remember being in a room having a conversation with people and they circle up and I'm kind of outside of the circle trying to get my word in, right? And so there are many experiences like that, unfortunately, that I could recount in my career.
So I see that you also have a podcast. I'm also a
Yeah.
podcast host myself as Ms. Steven. Can you tell us a little more about your podcast and what it entails?
Yes. So here's the thing you should know about me. I pivot quite often. So I am actually starting a new podcast.
Tell us.
The new podcast is called The Permission Project, and it is going to really be for Black women. And it's going to be around giving Black women permission. So things like permission to be audacious, permission to say no, permission to ask for what you want. And it's really gonna be just, again, based on that self-inclusion of let's stop waiting around for someone to put the hand out and include us, and let's actually start doing it
Right. Like
ourselves.
let's step up and tell people, hey, this is what we want. I'm not a Black woman. I am Latina. I would also be considered a woman of color, if you will. So to me, that's amazing. I love that. My podcast centers around blindness, but when I was developing it, a lot of the podcasts centered around blindness I found were run by men. And I didn't want that for my podcast. I wanted it to be ran by a woman, led by a woman. That is what I wanted. And I think it's amazing that you're doing this for Black women because it's so important to have that support.
Yeah, I appreciate that. When I originally thought about the coaching aspect of my business, I originally said women of color, including all women who come from marginalized backgrounds. But in having some conversations, I did have some Black women say to me, "You know what? There's never anything that's just for us. We have to share things. And we do have unique challenges in this country." So I made that decision to really hyper focus in. So yeah, please take it for every community. Let's all give ourselves permission.
Yes, absolutely. You ready for rapid fire?
I am.
We know that you are a businesswoman and you work all the time, but when you are not working, what are some of the fun hobbies that you enjoy?
I'm a word nerd, so I love to read. I love to write. I've written 3 books thus far, working on my 4th book,
Nice.
and I try to read 1 book a month.
Okay, love that.
I love that. Next question. What do you want to see?
Just that, what do I wanna see?
Yeah, what do you want to see?
I feel like this shouldn't be hard, but it is. I I would like to see more people like me in influential leadership roles in corporate America.
I love that.
I love that.
Awesome. Next question is, what do you believe to be true?
That I belong here.
Yes, I love that.
Oh, I love that. I love that too. That's good. The next question would be, What is one thing people would be surprised to learn about you?
People would be surprised to know that I'm disabled because I have invisible disabilities. So I have fibromyalgia, which is chronic fatigue and chronic pain. And yes, and for those of you who aren't familiar, that means that I am 24 hours out of the day, I am tired, and 24 hours out of the day, I'm in pain. I also have depression and anxiety. I have ADHD, and I have a little bit of hearing loss in my left ear. So neurologically, my brain is overworked. My body is overworked. I have a handicap placard on my car because there are some days when walking 20 feet is exhausting. A lot of times I am educating because from the outside, people may say, like, oh, I could never tell. You look quote unquote normal or quote unquote typical, right? And so that's really an educational that we never know what someone is experiencing.
I always make it a point to never assume anything because you never know. I mean, I'm blind. I also have ADHD as well, so I'm in the neurospicy club. So thank you so much for bringing that up. I really value education about disability because that's very important.
Right.
The disabled population, we are the largest marginalized
Yes,
group in this
yes.
country.
Mhm.
So everyone who is listening to this, there's probably a large possibility that someone in your life close to you is disabled. You may or may not know it. And so how can we really start to just build compassion and grace for people before we know what they're going through, but just understanding that there's a great possibility that they may be dealing with something.
So, if you were in a deserted island, what is one tool related to disability that you would take with you?
This is gonna be really funny. I would take my ZzzQuil pills because I have chronic fatigue, but I also have chronic insomnia, and it's really hard for me to sleep at night, and I think that I would wanna be able to go to bed at night.
That's very important. Sleep is very important. Yeah, I sometimes feel like, I mean, I'm blind, right? I sometimes feel like I need more sleep than my average sighted peer because, I feel like I use a lot of energy during the day. So I'm there with you on sleep, girl.
I love that. I hadn't thought of it like that before. That's interesting, yeah. Thank you for providing that insight.
All right, so we have one more rapid fire question, and that is if you could have one superpower to help with your advocacy work, what would it be?
If I could have one superpower, that would be the power to transport to like in the Jetsons where you zip from one place
Mm-hmm.
to the other. I love to travel, but it can be very exhausting.
Yes.
It can be exhausting,
Oh.
right? So if I could just blink my eyes and be across the country, that would be amazing.
Well, Angie, while you're on it, what would be your superpower for your advocacy work? Because for me, I always say healing. I would like to use healing, have the power to heal with my advocacy.
I'd say maybe to stop discrimination.
Okay. I think that's great. And I think that's the perfect opportunity for all of us to use our superpowers to conclude this amazing show.
If people wanted to connect with you or know more about your business and the services you offer, where can they find you?
It's really simple. You can go to my website, which is bethruffin.com, or you can find me on all social media platforms at the Beth Ruffin.
Okay, sweet. Thank you.
And we just have to thank you so much, Beth, for coming on to our show. And thank you so much for all the work that you are doing and inspiring underserved voices. And we can stand up and say, you know what? We will create our space for others. We don't have to wait for anyone else to give us a microphone. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much, Beth.
Thank
It was
you.
great having you on.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here.
Innovating Inclusion is produced in association with Envisions, a program of the Fox Family Foundation, whose mission is to break the link between poverty and disability. The goal of Envisions is to teach high school and college students to innovate with universal design in mind, where young entrepreneurs of all abilities create side-by-side So as they become the next generation of leaders and hiring managers, any stigma is gone and the world is accessible to everyone. Our theme song was written by Alex Kapp, with incidental music by Kylie Cooper and Bruce McGinnis. Our producer is Akita Nakano. Please visit our website, envisions.org.